All right, so welcome. Thank you so much for watching our video about our Wellness Ambassadors training on avoiding burnout and compassion fatigue. My name is Shauna Olson-Hong. I am a licensed clinical social worker and I'm the Director of Counseling Services here at Cal State East Bay.
Yes, and my name is Shatina Hunter, and I'll be co-leading this wonderful workshop with Shauna. I'm one of the counselor faculty in the Student Health and Counseling Services, and I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Perfect. All right. So this is a video because so many people have not been able to come live to our workshop sessions. But if you have the chance, we really encourage folks to also participate in some of our live sessions because there are a lot of breakout room discussions and questions and just sharing of resources that from our evaluations, folks have found to be really, really helpful. So this is partly about giving you information, which we can transmit in this video, but it's also been a lot about community building. So if you have a chance to watch this video with other people or discuss it as a department or talk with other people that have participated in the workshop, we really, really encourage you to do that. So today we're going to talk about just kind of the toll that it might be taking on us as staff and as faculty to be supporting students in this era of pandemic and structural racism and economic crisis and election and all the things. So I really encourage you to think about engaging in this workshop, not to think about what am I going to pass on to students or other people, but first thinking about how am I taking in this information just for myself and how am I going to use this in my own life and my own practice. There will always be time to pass on, whatever good things you receive, but try and take it in for yourself first. And in order to do that, let's start with a grounding and intentions exercise. So I'm just going to lead us through some reflections. And this is a grounding practice taken from the Strozzi Institute for Embodied Practice. So if you're able to stand up, that would be really helpful. Stand with your legs hip-width apart and your arms at your sides. And you might want to shift from side to side a little bit or shake your arms and legs just to settle into yourself. And first of all, bring your attention to your body and the sensations that you might be feeling. Notice the temperature of the air around you. It might be more cold or more warm. You might notice some pressure. So where in your body do you feel tense or relaxed? And you might notice some movements. Do you feel your heart beating or your stomach gurgling? Just let your focus move away from what you're thinking to what your body is experiencing. Secondly, notice your emotions. In this moment, how are you feeling? Do you feel more sad, more happy, content or angry, guilty, grateful, or scared? Notice how you are right now. And sometimes we have a lot of different things that come up for us all at the same time. All of that is okay. And now notice your internal dialogue. What are you saying to yourself inside? What are you thinking about? And as these things maybe start to pull your attention away, just keep bringing them back, bringing your attention back to your sensations. So we're going to start our workshop today by centering in 4 different directions. First of all, let's think of our length. So from your center, from your belly button, feel your length and allow more space between each of your vertebrae. Feel all the way down into your legs. In centering, we think of length as self-respect or dignity and the ability to see dignity in others. Breathe in and fill up your lungs all the way down into your belly. And now if you're able to, you can stretch down toward the ground and think about the things that ground you and root you. Think about who your ancestors are and what is your connection to the earth on which you stand. And continue to breathe deeply. And now roll up again and stretch your arms up tall. And just do the practice of taking up space. Let yourself become right-sized and think about all of the things that have grown up in you, that you bring to this space and to your work. Think about the skills and experiences and giftings that you share with your team and with our students. And think about the growing that you're still doing, the learning that awaits you in the year ahead. We are always growing into ourselves. We never fully arrive. So just know that and breathe. The next direction we're going to do our centering in is our width. So from your center, fill into your width from side to side. Feel your sensations and fill yourself out from shoulder to shoulder, from hip to hip. Feel yourself in the outsides of both your arms. We can think of our width as relationship and connection, or as the place where we reach out to others and receive them reaching out to us. Think about the rich community that surrounds you in your life. Think about the other people on our campus that have participated in this workshop or that you might be watching this video with right now. Think about your team who works alongside you to serve students, and feel them with you, even when we're not together physically. Continue to breathe in deeply. The next direction we're going to focus on is our depth. So feel yourself from your back to your front. Think about your low back. Think about the space between your shoulder blades, the back of your legs. And then find your breath and your heartbeat, the feelings inside your body, and fill all the way forward to your front side. You might notice the clothes on the front and the back of your body. We can think of depth as the connection between our backs and our past and our ancestors, and then to our fronts, our future, the unknown, our intentions and our vision. Depth is also where we find our longings. We think about what is meaningful to us, our purpose, our guts, and our hearts. Pay attention to how much depth you feel right now. Do you feel thin or do you feel thick? And center into that depth and breathe. And then finally, we're going to center into our commitments. So put a hand on your belly, your center, and turn your attention to what matters to you. What are you committing yourself to? Ask yourself, what is important to me? Who or what do I love? And what are the things that I long for? Let your commitment fill you out. Let it inform your nervous system. We're practicing embodying our commitments so that we can act from them and continue to breathe. All right. Thank you so much for doing that with us. And just pay attention to how that felt and what came up for you. And we're going to be thinking a lot about our motivation and our reasons for doing the work that we do. And so those intentions and commitments are going to carry us through the rest of this workshop. So I'm going to start with a slide on what we're working to prevent. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we really want to focus our time today on thinking about what are the things we're going to do to keep ourselves well. But just so we're all on the same page about what we don't want to happen, we're thinking about burnout, which is when we feel physically, emotionally, or mentally exhausted. And it might also involve doubts about your competence and even the value of your work. Why am I doing this? What is it for? Another concept that we want to avoid is called compassion fatigue. And that is when you are working a lot with people who are under a lot of strain or have experienced trauma, and you're listening to those stories. And after a while, all of that just starts to leave a buildup and a residue on you. And lastly, the concept of vicarious traumatization is again the cumulative impact that people working on the front lines experience over time as they witness a lot of stories of hardship and trauma. So these are all the ways that keeping ourselves pushing to keep doing hard work for people that are suffering can start to impact us as caretakers and providers. Next, I just want to acknowledge the book that we are taking our material from today. So almost all the material that we're talking about today is from a book called Trauma Stewardship. And this is a book that was written specifically for folks that do crisis work. And so folks that maybe answer a suicide hotline or a sexual violence hotline, or people who are working with environmental tragedies. So it was written with those people in mind. But I feel like this book is really, really valuable to all of us right now because we are all experiencing crisis and trauma in the midst of this pandemic that is ongoing. And so more and more as we talk about these concepts, we're just finding that it resonates with everybody we're talking to. So we are trying to take care of people who are living through something very hard at the same time that we ourselves are living through it. And all of that is impacting us. So now I'm going to pass it to Shatina to talk about some of the ways that we're feeling those impacts.
Yes, so it's really important that we are able to acknowledge for ourselves first the way that trauma can impact us. I know that one thing that Shauna made sure that she was able to point out is that this workshop is for you rather than you trying to figure out the best way to support people. It's important for us to have a moment to check in with ourselves and even just trying to figure out if we're being impacted by the work that we are engaging in. A lot of the times we'll feel like because we're in a position to be the helpers, that makes us immune from being able to experience any type of trauma or be impacted in any way when that's not true at all. So we have to make sure that, if any of these signs that I'm going to mention are popping up, that we're able to take the time and tend to ourselves. So some of the trauma exposure responses that you could potentially be experiencing could be feeling helpless and feeling hopeless. And basically, what that can feel like is that there may be a problem that is arising and it begins to feel a little bit unmanageable. And you may have felt like, you've done all the things that you possibly could do and you still don't really feel like it's making a difference. Like you feel really helpless. And if you're able to actually cause a difference for that person or be able to support them and what it is that they are experiencing and going through. And it can lead you to a point of feeling very overwhelmed because of the fact that it feels so unmanageable for you to be able to see the change that you were hoping that you could see for this person, as well as sometimes it's overwhelming to see another person not be able to see that change that you were hoping they could see for themselves. A sense that one can never do enough. So that pretty much coincides with what I was just talking about in regards to constantly feeling like you're doing so much, but it's not enough to create sustainable change. So you can feel like there's a constant urgency that you have to keep doing more and keep doing more because what you're doing isn't necessarily making as big of an impact as you thought. And sometimes we have to take a moment and step back and just kind of reflect on where we kind of get this framework and these ideas from, just that sense of urgency and not feeling like we're doing enough. We have to take a step back and examine, do we feel like we aren't enough? Is it something that we learned in society because we sometimes live in systems that are very oppressing, that it can automatically set us up to feel like we're not doing enough, which then leads to that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. Hypervigilance. So a lot of the time, if we are constantly hearing traumatic stories or hearing about the things that people have experienced, that could be very fearful and scary for anyone to acknowledge and go through. We can begin to kind of have like that sense of fight or flight within ourselves. We can have the ability to feel like things might be difficult or dangerous, and we're always kind of assessing the situation, assessing our surroundings, trying to make sure that we are okay because of something that we may have heard and internalized based off of work that we may be doing with students, or even sometimes things that we may have heard from our coworkers may tend to have this particular impact on us. When we are in a state of hypervigilance, this is your mind and your body's way of trying to be able to create some balance and safety for yourself. So it's a very normal reaction, but it's important for you to identify for yourself when this is happening, because it definitely can pinpoint to you if you feel like you are not safe at the moment. If you feel like you may become a victim of something that has occurred to the student or something that has occurred on campus or something that you heard has happened maybe in their neighborhood. So being very much aware of if you feel like you are in danger in a setting that you usually didn't feel like you were in danger in before. Diminished creativity. So you may notice that if you are sinking more into a trauma response, that you may begin to feel less flexible, like you just don't have the width to want to be creative, or maybe you're not adding into discussions or, different programming that your department may be doing anymore. Things may begin to be a little redundant with you because you're not able to have fresh ideas, and nothing original is coming to mind. So in order to be able to kind of reach a place of creativity within ourselves, we have to feel like we are calm and that we are able to feel like we're connected to our authenticity and our purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. But if we're impacted by trauma, then we may kind of have a disconnect in that, and we may not feel like we're able to access just that level of creative input that we usually would have. Inability to embrace complexity. So this can typically look like you needing to know clear signs between if something is good or if something is going to be bad, if something is right or if something is wrong. Like, it's difficult to be able to have any type of in between. You need to know if it's this or if it's that. And you may find yourself just, saying no to more opportunities or no to certain things that you usually would love to help out with. You may have more difficulty in regards to being present with that person to where you're not passing judgment, because you'll begin to pass judgment more. You'll be able to see that you are making more assumptions about people in ways that you may not have made assumptions before. So it's important to notice if you're having a difficulty with embracing the complexity of maybe who's sitting in front of you or whatever situation they are bringing to the table. Minimizing. So this can definitely look like when extreme cases may definitely impact you to the point where you feel like, if it's not as big or as grandeur as some other situations you've heard about, then it may feel like it's not a big enough deal, or it may feel like it does not need your attention in comparison to things that may have happened to other people or that you've heard other students endure. You may begin to downplay the stories that you're healing or downplay the issues that are being presented to you. And sometimes people will say like, oh, well, other people have it worse off, and not really being able to acknowledge for that person what it is that they're truly going through. And that's just a sign of showing that maybe you're beginning to have less compassion because of your exposure to trauma. Chronic exhaustion and physical ailments. So as we know, the mind and body are connected. Mental and physical health are very much connected. And then so if you have experienced a level of trauma, you may notice that you may see symptoms in a more somatic or body way, to where maybe you have more headaches or your stomach is hurting. Maybe you have a back or a neck ache and you didn't necessarily know where it came from, but you may begin to start being sick more and noticing like, okay, you're missing out on work more because of the fact that you have to stay home because you're getting a cold all the time and you're not able to redeem yourself or overcome that cold. So it's important to know if you're feeling fatigue, if you're feeling somatic symptoms, then that's a sign that something could be wrong. And kind of like acknowledging that you have choice in the work that you do. So if you do feel like you're getting somatic symptoms, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed because maybe you're taking on too much and you need to have a little bit of disconnect or a break. Inability to listen and deliberate avoidance. So this is usually when you get into the point to where you're sending a student to someone else, a student that you usually would meet with, but you're deciding to send them down the hall to your coworker, and you're avoiding difficult students, you're avoiding difficult situations, you may even be avoiding difficult coworkers. So it's kind of like it begins to look like the highlight of your day is when it's time to go home, or the highlight of your day is when you have an off day because you're just avoiding like any more responsibility and anything that's associated with the position that you are working in. Dissociative moments. So this can happen when maybe you find yourself daydreaming in meetings, or daydreaming when you're sitting down with someone, or having to do a project more than you usually would. You may notice that you weren't paying attention for the last couple of seconds, or you did not catch the last couple of sentences that someone said. And it's kind of like sometimes you can feel like you're experiencing like a level of intrusive or overwhelming feelings as well that can kind of make you want to detach from what's going on, want to detach from the present moment and kind of just float away to receive a little bit of a break. because of feeling so overwhelmed all the time. A sense of persecution. So this looks like, we may feel like we're being, when we feel like we're being mistreated or that we have little control over our life, sometimes that can cause us also to feel a little helpless and hopeless. And it's important that even as we're going through this workshop, that you're acknowledging that you have power of choice. Even though you may, be in a job where you feel like you have to stay there, it is opportunities for you to be able to express yourself in a way of at least taking on projects or taking up space in the way that you feel like is most healthy. So sometimes we can feel that, your well-being at your job is on your boss or it's on your supervisor, and you're not really taking action in, an ownership of that whole idea that you do have choice. So it's important to be able to notice where maybe you're blaming your boss or your supervisor a little bit more in things that you didn't necessarily used to blame them for because you feel like it's their fault. So being aware and paying attention to that as well. Guilt. So guilt is a huge thing that people can experience if they have been exposed to trauma. And this can look like, you may feel, maybe sometimes you have survivor's guilt because, something may not have impacted you in the way that it impacted someone that you're talking to. Or maybe you feel like you may be in a space of privilege, so you'll kind of downplay those experiences or maybe not even mention it because you want to level the playing field or maybe even relate to the person a little bit more and not make them feel like you're on a different level than they are. And sometimes, people having those, being in that state of where you are in your life is important to share as well because it helps you to be able to connect with people. So when we kind of downplay things or we don't want to share our true authentic experiences, it takes away from being able to just connect with people in a more authentic way, which people find to be far more helpful than you trying to protect them from something that is very true to how you just live and go about being in this world. So it's important to acknowledge if you are feeling guilt and then as a result, how that guilt is impacting your behavior. Fear is something that is automatically very real when it comes to trauma. And it kind of reminds me of that sense of hypervigilance that I talked about a couple of moments ago. So you may notice that you're feeling intense feelings of that you don't feel safe, that you feel very vulnerable, or that you feel like you are going to potentially become a victim of what it is that, you heard a student maybe go through on campus. And then so being aware of if you become more hypervigilant, if you have more fear, if you don't necessarily feel safe. Anger and cynicism can look like, your natural reactions to ongoing situations, tend to just result in you being just very upset. And sometimes it can turn into volatile language and just the way that you are expressing yourself and being able to just notice that if you get to a point to where anger or being cynical is your reaction most of the time, it's important to take a step back and figure out okay, what's underneath these emotions? And if you have a healthy outlet to be able to express and externalize what it is that you are experiencing, and knowing that there has to be just a balance between emotions. It's okay if those angry emotions are there, but it's also important to acknowledge how is that impacting the work that you are doing. And knowing that you can't necessarily utilize people as scapegoats when it comes to the anger that you may be feeling or projecting things onto people, because that may not be the positive thing to do. And then if we're going to work and projecting different things or going home and projecting our anger on people, it has the potential to be able to just dismantle the support system that you may have as you're having these traumatic responses to being exposed to trauma. Another thing would be an inability to empathize and numbing. So this can definitely look like you needing distance or you needing a break, when you feel overwhelmed, or that distance or that break could be you are attempting to utilize substances in order to be able to have a break from reality or be able to have a break from all the different things that you are hearing and experiencing, as well as just noticing if you're hearing stories that people are telling you and you're just kind of feeling like it's not a big deal, or you're not really able to connect in the way that you thought that you were able to connect usually, or how you usually show up for people. It's really important to just kind of recognize for yourself in those moments if it is hard to empathize and then you are noticing that you are resorting to activities to numb your feelings and numb your experiences out. Are you feeling overworked? Are you overscheduling yourself? Do you need more of a break to where you are able to just kind of recalibrate yourself and get yourself more balanced and centered to be able to take on each day? Addictions kind of goes into that idea of just that numbing factor. So kind of noticing if you're using substances to be able to escape. or if you're doing certain behaviors and activities that you didn't necessarily do that are habit forming as a way of being able to escape as well. Maybe you'll notice that you're not being as productive because you'd rather spend more time doing these things because it's more freeing, and it allows you to be in a space that is not as daunting or difficult to be in, or think about all the situations that are heavy that you have to face at work. And sometimes that can happen because you feel like you may be less equipped to deal with issues. So it's just easier to result to maybe playing a video game on your work computer or being on your phone, or searching even social media all day, or going home and having a couple of glasses of wine. Grandiosity. So this can look like an inflated sense of, importance related to one's work. It definitely can feel like, if you're not there, or say you need to take a day off, if you take this day off, then who's going to handle all the responsibilities that you have on your list? Who's going to be able to make sure that everything is done? Only you. Sometimes that can feel very much like it is your whole responsibility to take on, and work becomes more so the center of your identity rather than just a piece of your life. And, you can begin to feel like you can't leave because everyone is constantly relying on you, and they won't be okay if you're not there. So really being able to check in for yourself, if you've even taken that on as a responsibility, and kind of not been able to acknowledge that work will be okay. People will be okay, even if you took a day off.
Thank you so much, Shatina. So this is a time where we invite you to pause this video and grab a piece of paper and a pen or whatever is helpful to write with, and take a few minutes for individual reflection. So keep looking at this list and think about which of these things have you experienced since COVID began, and it might be more than one. So go ahead and pause the video and do some reflection. All right, welcome back. And I just want to say that when we have done this workshop live, and we've done a poll over the Zoom to see which of these different staff and faculty and student leaders were experiencing, at least one person marked everything on this list. And so these are all real. And I want you to know that you're not alone if you marked any of these or even a bunch of these. Other people are experiencing the same thing. And I think it's really helpful to know that these might be trauma responses, and not just, I'm not dealing with this well, or not just, there's something wrong with me. These are natural ways that our bodies and our minds and our emotions respond when we're under ongoing trauma. So this is the time in the workshop where, if we were doing it live, we would go into breakout rooms and have some discussion. So if you're watching this video with other people, we invite you to take a pause again to have some conversations with your colleagues, and just talk about what is some of these that you have noticed yourself experiencing in this last year. And do you think that this might be a trauma response, or was it something that you've always experienced? Or, do you have another idea about where it's coming from? So take about 7 minutes to have that discussion. If right now you're watching this video on your own, then I want you to pause the video and think about, who am I going to talk with this about later today? Who's somebody that can kind of hear me out as I share, this has been my experience, and I'm learning maybe this is related to trauma. I think it's really important for us to not just think about these in theory, but have conversations and build community about it. So we invite you to do that.
All right, and then so welcome back. If you're able to take the time to pause the video and speak with someone, and I just want to kind of add a little bit of more dialogue to just how trauma can be impactful, depending on some things that may have happened in your past, your background, as well as just your lived experience. And it's really important to just know for yourself, like, if you have experienced adverse childhood experiences, which is usually called ACEs, some of you may have heard about it. Dr. Nadine Burke is someone that talks a lot about things, and she has a book that's also published about it. But being able to just acknowledge for yourself what you have experienced growing up. If you were a child or a person that experienced, poverty, or maybe you were homeless, or you had to care for a caregiver that was ill, maybe you had a significant loss when you were a child, just kind of understanding and acknowledging and knowing those experiences, or any level of trauma that you may have personally experienced yourself, or you may have witnessed someone else experience. If you have been exposed to something such as those, then those can have a true impact on just the way that some of these trauma responses may show up for you. And sometimes they can make us a little bit more vulnerable and susceptible to, maybe even things like numbing in order to be able to cope with certain situations that we have experienced. So it's important to be mindful and kind of reflect for yourself even about things that you may have experienced growing up. If you feel like, why is this so difficult, for you, being able to take a look back can help inform you a little bit more just about yourself and processing. It's also important to identify just your identity and how that plays a role. Like these are things, our identities, our cultures, they play a big role in how things impact us on a daily basis. So it's important to acknowledge for yourself, whether your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality, legal status, disability, etc. If it's connecting with the students and the people that you're coming into contact with daily, because this can definitely make you be able to relate in a different way, because sometimes you may feel like if this is a person that you identify with, and maybe you're the only person in your department that identifies with this person or this group, you can feel like it's your responsibility to take on everything in order to be able to just help and support this group. And you may feel like you have to put the most investment in it. And by taking that approach, that can have an impact on you to where it becomes overwhelming because it's not technically your responsibility to be the only source of support for that group of people, even if it is a group of people that you identify with and they see themselves in you as well. So it's important to be able to just identify for yourself the common experiences that you have within particular communities and trying to be aware of how you're balancing that out and balancing the responsibilities so that that then doesn't cause you to have one of these traumatic responses as well.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm going to dive a little further into that concept of how our identities influence how we experience these traumas. So take a moment to think about the different identities that you might hold. So whether that's race and ethnicity, your gender presentation, sexuality, your disability status, your economic class. You might even want to make a list on a piece of paper, or what are some of the identities that feel really significant to you. And notice some of these areas where you might hold more privilege and some of these areas where you might feel less powerful. And so we all have, a myriad of identities that we all hold, and some of these are in more privileged positions and some of these are in less. So we talk a lot about intersectionality and where these identities come together. And those intersections say a lot about how we each experience the world. So for example, Shatina and I are both women, and so there might be a lot of shared experiences that we have as women walking through the world. And yet, the way that I experience the world as an Asian American woman is going to be really different than how Shatina experiences the world as a Black woman. And so we have all these layers of identity that work together in really unique ways that change the experiences we have, the ways we grow up, the way people perceive us and how they might treat us, our access to resources and what's available to us. And so all of those give us a particular perspective. So just being aware of those layers for yourself. How am I coming into all these things that I'm experiencing that is related to how I grew up and what resources I have right now and how people are treating me that might be different from how other people are experiencing this pandemic or this situation. And then how does that interact, as Shatina was saying, with how do I interact with students that might be having the same experiences, might be having different experiences than I do. So know that each experience is going to be unique because your intersections are going to be unique for you. But it's really important to be aware of what are the identities that I'm carrying, what is feeding into the perspective that I have on what's going on. How does that influence how I respond to a student? Or what do I assume about them without maybe even asking? Or how is my experience different from one of my coworkers because we have different identities in these ways? So that's all layers that we want people to be aware of as they're entering into this training. So enough about the hard things. Let's start to move on to the things that can help us in these situations. So there is a psychologist named Bessel van der Kolk who does a lot of research into trauma and trauma responses. And these are, and then he talks about what is the antidote when we are feeling traumatized. And so trauma really takes us back to the past, to things that we've experienced before, or brings us into the future where we're worried about what's coming and how can I be ready for it. And the antidote to all of that is to be centered in the present moment. So really thinking about, where am I here and now? I don't need to be in the past. I don't need to be in the present. I don't need to be in the future. I'm just right here. And a few examples of some concrete acts that we can do to center ourselves are things like breathing exercises or grounding exercises, mindfulness meditations or mindful movement, such as yoga practices, or prayer. And so we're going to give you an example of one of these right now. This is called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise. And it's very simple. You can do this anytime on your own. So it engages all of our senses, because being present really means being in our bodies. And so first of all, just look around you wherever you are right now and name to yourself 5 things that you can see. And then just reach around you and name 4 things that you can feel. And so it might be, your clothes that you're wearing. You might reach out and touch things. Think about things that have different sensations. So something soft, something that's hard, and just go ahead and engage with 4 things that you can feel. And now just listen and identify 3 things that you can hear. And I wanted you to stretch a little bit, so I stopped talking so that you could think of things other than my voice. So think about birds that are outside, other noises that might be in the room with you right now. And then name 2 things that you can smell. Whatever odors you're aware of. And then finally name 1 good thing about yourself, 1 thing that you appreciate, 1 thing that you're proud of. And doing this exercise brings us into the present moment. It kind of gets us out of some of the anxious, overwhelmed loops that we can go through in our minds. And so that is a practice that you can come back to whenever you need it, and just do it in your mind when you need to. Another thing that Bessel van der Kolk talks about are common traits in stress-resistant persons. And so these are things that he notices as patterns in people that are able to withstand a lot of stress and trauma. The first one is a sense of personal control. And so feeling like I have some choice in my life. There are some things I can have an effect on. The world is not just happening to me, but I can control some things in my environment. Maybe not everything, but some things. The next is the sense of pursuing some personally meaningful tasks. And often, because this workshop is largely about the work that we're doing on our campus, so thinking about what is meaningful to me in the work that I do, the impact I'm able to have on students, the ways I interact with my coworkers, the way I am promoting the aims of the university. So think about what are you committing yourself to that is meaningful to you. The next is healthy lifestyle choices. So those are really basic things like, do I get enough sleep every night? Do I eat the right number of meals a day? And do I choose for food that really nourishes my body? Do I drink water regularly? Right? Do I move my body and get some kind of exercise regularly? What are the lifestyle choices I'm making to take care of myself? And then lastly, social supports. What kind of system do I have where I feel like I can connect with other people? I feel like people have my back. I'm able to be connected in return and give something back to them is very, very significant. So that's why we're talking about community being such an important part of this particular workshop. And now we're going to turn to the information we're going to share about the book Trauma Stewardship that I mentioned. And so she breaks it down into 4 cardinal directions and then a centering practice. So she talks about what's in the north is a space for inquiry. So this is about time for reflection. So she says that reflection is an antidote to helplessness. And so when I'm feeling like I don't have control of my life, let me just stop and think, why am I doing this? And is it working for me? Because I do have some control over my understanding of what's happening right now. So let me focus on doing some reflection. And this is often something we don't take time for when we're feeling really overwhelmed, but it can make a big difference. Another thing that's important to reflect on is this concept of what she calls trauma mastery. And that's the thought that a lot of people enter helping professions because they themselves have been impacted by trauma in some way. So for example, somebody who has experienced sexual assault might say, the work that I want to do with my life is to work with survivors. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else. Or I want to share my story and let people know that healing is possible. And so that can be a really important part of somebody's healing journey from trauma, to say, I want to make a difference and I want to do something that's positive, that kind of counteracts what I experienced. At the same time, it can get a little off kilter when we focus too much on, again, that sense of grandiosity and like my identity, and the whole hope for my healing is wrapped up in this work that I'm doing. And so I need to help every survivor, or else I can never recover from my own trauma, for example. And so reflecting on, is this desire for trauma mastery part of why I've chosen the work that I'm doing? And if it is, how is that working for me? Is that actually leading toward my own healing? Or is it getting a little unbalanced? And again, my work identity is becoming a bigger part of my overall identity than it really should be. In which case, maybe there are some other ways that I need to seek healing that are not just about the work that I'm doing, but are about reflection, are about support, are about getting a bigger tool belt in the ways that I'm healing from my own experiences, so that I'm not completely reliant on this work and this role that I have in order to feel like I'm okay or I'm moving forward.
All right, so another area that she focused on was in the East, and that is choosing our focus. So it is very important to be able to remind yourself that you get to have power over where you place your focus. You can decide, if you want to focus on the things that are more positive, or if you want to really focus on the things that are more negative about the position that you're in. But ultimately, it is your responsibility to decide where that attention lies. You get to decide if you want to change your life, if you want to change your work setting that you have. You get to decide if you want to reframe your experience. And sometimes that's all that it takes. It's just a little bit of change of perspective and being able to reframe your experience in order for you to not be as impacted as you may have been thus far. So really being able to allow yourself the opportunity to concentrate on the things that are more in front of you, and allowing yourself to take a step back can cause you to kind of widen your lens, or even zone in a little bit more on what may be most important for you to do in that moment. So also reflect on, like I said, just your habits of how you're thinking, and just what are your thoughts that are going through your mind while you're going to work, while you're at work, and while you're on your way home from work. What are the different ideas that tend to pop in your head? Do you notice that your commentary tends to be, more optimistic, or has it become more pessimistic? It's very important to be able to acknowledge that for yourself, and knowing that you have the flexibility to develop a plan B. I know that society in America sometimes puts the pressure on people to think they have to choose just one thing and stay in that one thing until the end of time, because you may have invested money, you may have invested years and sacrifice to get to that place. But the reality is you can have the flexibility to try on different hats, to try out different things, and allow yourself just that space to kind of dream about, if you weren't doing this type of work, what type of work would you be doing? What were things that you once wanted to tap into? That can allow you to begin to be dreaming of even alternative work, or maybe you might actually tap into having an idea about a project that you can actually introduce in the work that you're already doing to make it feel more meaningful than it may have been feeling in the current time. So know that in the same way that you chose this path, you can always choose another path and go in a different direction. All right. And so when we think about heading to the South, then definitely building compassion in community, which is so huge because I know that there were some points in the trauma exposure reactions that talked about, that you can actually lose compassion and actually lose being authentic and connecting with people and do actions that will cause you to just kind of dismantle the community and support that you have. So being able to practice self-compassion is so important. And sometimes, often, one of the hardest things that people, are able to do, because a lot of people say, I can be very kind to other people, I can be very compassionate, I can empathize with other people, but they have difficulty with being able to give that same love, care, and attention to themselves. And sometimes when you feel like you fall just more so on that side of the fence, it's important to just acknowledge for yourself, like, okay, it's hard for you to be able to focus solely on you talking to you. Taking a step back and saying, okay, if it was a friend that you were talking to, what would you say? Or if your friend were talking to you, what are things that you have heard them say before that can help you just feel more supported and help you to be able to acknowledge what it is that you are experiencing and going through? Another is practicing compassion for others. So, yes, you may find it very easy to be able to have compassion for other people, but there might be someone that you have a little bit difficulty with having compassion for. And then so being able to kind of like identify a person or a situation that maybe that difficult person that you may be avoiding and allow yourself to just think of them in a different way. Allow yourself to commit to maybe trying a small activity each month that you can maybe do for that person, or creating 5 extra minutes in your schedule to fully listen to that person. And notice if you see a shift, because like I said before, it's all about just like that reframing that we can tend to do and putting the effort in doing that. That can really make the shift that you were hoping for, that causes you to be more optimistic about things. And it can just definitely decrease your suffering because it puts you in a more positive mindset rather than letting the more negative things overwhelm your experience. And it also provides you with just an opportunity to learn, because while we're at work, we will hope that it is a place that we continue to learn and that we continue to grow. And then reflecting on your role models in community. So this is really important because it's important to just kind of think about people that have come before you, as well as people that you have connected with that may have done the work that you have done already, or they may still be doing the work that you're doing currently. So being able to just kind of tap into just, reflecting on maybe things that your ancestors maybe have done. How did they handle situations? How are they able to create space for healing with the trauma that it is that they may have experienced or, witnessed someone else experiencing? Being able to just kind of nurture in yourself like accountability and nurturing yourself integrity and be able to find hopefulness by being able to tap into things that your ancestors may have done, or maybe there's questions and conversations that you can have with people in your community, because you would be surprised to know, like Shauna said before, you're not alone in these experiences that you're having. And so being able to reach out and connect with other people and see what do they do when they feel like they're in this position and they're being impacted in a particular way, to just kind of continue to strengthen that community that you have with people. And then also another thing to just kind of be mindful of is thinking about just your systems and how to make them better in your life. And then so when it comes to being in that work environment and practicing compassion for others and trying to create a more gratitude and positive filled environment, just thinking for yourself of like, maybe what are ways that, maybe there can be less gossiping in the setting, or, examine the ways that you are talking to your loved ones when you get home, so that you're not like projecting things onto them. So there's ways that you can kind of spread a little compassion in your work life, as well as, when you get home, if you're carrying things over to that. And then when it comes to the West, then that's definitely about finding balance. And then so reflecting on your work environment and work routine. So it's very easy for us to get into routines. A lot of us thrive by having that structure and having that routine. But sometimes those routines, tend to be a little bit tiring. And now we don't worn ourselves out and it's not enthusiastic anymore. Like nothing's fun about it. So being able to just kind of examine for yourselves where you can make shifts and where things can maybe be more balanced. Maybe you could take a different route to work. Maybe you can try a different place to eat on campus when we're able to eat on campus more. Maybe try a different food truck at this point. But being able to just add things and make things a little bit different to try and, like I said, add to just that optimism of wanting to be here and wanting to be in this setting. And then creating daily rhythms or taking breaks to be able to tap in and attend to yourself and your well-being. We all need a break throughout the day. one thing I definitely suggest is not working through that lunch break so that you have the opportunity to choose a different food truck or even just go outside and eat your lunch. Being able to just breathe and just reconnect with, you know, who you are as a person. If you feel like your whole identity is consumed in the work that you do, having times throughout the day to just feel grounded in yourself is something that can be really helpful. You know, maybe you connect with a coworker and you do like a Zoom lunch or something, and that creates something different within your day and different within your schedule. But trying to just reflect on those habits are really important. And looking at time off. I know that y'all have time that you can take off that you've probably been saving. I don't know what for, but you're probably saving it for some reason. Know that it is okay to utilize some of that time if you need it. It doesn't always have to be for vacation or for an emergency. Sometimes you need a self-care day. And with everything that is going on, it's important to utilize a couple of times, or maybe it doesn't have to be a full day. It could just be the first 4 hours of the day that you just have time to sleep in for an extra hour or two before you have to get up and get dressed and go to work. So really allowing yourself to take time off, be with yourself, connect with yourself, keeping energy moving rather than absorbing and accumulating it. So energy is a real thing, and it definitely can become very stagnant within our minds, within our bodies. So it's important to just kind of keep things moving. And, you know, as a lot of us know with trauma, it tends to deal with a lot of fight or flight response. And then or freeze response. So it's really important to just keep things and allow energy to not take root when it comes to trauma, because that's when you will find yourself having more somatic reactions, and you're finding yourself getting sick more, being in pain more, and trying to make sure that even you're releasing energy throughout the day. So maybe you go on a walk during your lunchtime, do some stretches. We're all sitting in front of the computer for hours on end. So be able to allow yourself to stretch a little more, drink that water and get hydrated, and just keep things moving throughout your system is so very important. And lastly, you know, practicing gratitude, having a gratitude attitude. It can sound so simple and cheesy, but it honestly can make the biggest difference by being able to help in reframing your experience and your perspective. And then so maybe, you know, when you get up, you know, and you're on your way to work, or you're on your way setting up, you know, at your home office or outside, like you just acknowledge 3 things that you appreciate about the work you do, or acknowledge 3 things you once appreciated about the work that you did, just to kind of reconnect with just being in that feel-good space of why you chose what it is that you are currently doing. And then at the end of the day, just kind of think about what are 3 things that you appreciated about that day so far. Maybe it's one thing. You know, try and just kind of focus on something that you feel very grateful for, and that can just really help you to be able to have more appreciation for others, more appreciation for your setting, and most appreciation for yourself and the hard work that you're doing.
I like, Shatine, how you change that from 3 things to 1 thing, because we, you know, so let's set the bar at a reasonable pace. We'll start with 1 thing, and then once we start looking for gratitude, it tends to hit us more. So it's easier to find once we start that habit. So the last thing in trauma stewardship that she talks about is our core. So how do we put these things into practice every day? Because if we just know them in our heads, they don't do us a whole lot of good. So her suggestion is 2 things. One is to create an intention at the beginning of the workday for how you want to live it. And that might be thinking about, you know, I want to be kind. You know, I hope I have a positive interaction with a student today. I want to just be available and flexible. My intention is to take my lunch break and go take a walk outside and try a different food truck today. Whatever it is, set an intention that just makes you really deliberate about this is how I want to be living my day. And then at the end of the day, create another intention for what you are closing and leaving behind. And I think this is more important than ever as we're working from home or we're working remotely, because it feels like our work days sometimes never really end. We're always checking email, we're doing something else on the computer, and work is just seeping into every aspect of our lives. But one thing about trauma stewardship is that it's very, very important to say work is just one part of my identity, and there are other parts that I'm also investing energy in, and I'm acknowledging that they are also important. And so let me think about my family and my friends and my hobbies and the other parts of myself that are not part of my work life. So being really deliberate to create some rituals of how do I leave work, even if I don't have a commute every day. How am I going to say I'm turning my phone off, I'm turning my computer off, I'm turning off my notifications from my work email. Different things that we can do to just differentiate. I am now moving on to the other aspects of my life. I'm going to focus there, and all the work stuff will still be there for me in the morning. So really creating some bookends to our days about how we want to live them and how we're closing work up at the end of the day. So we wanted to share some additional resources that are books about these sorts of topics. And the slides to this presentation should be in the notes right below this video. And so you can go in and click on these links to find out what they are. But we really encourage you to, if there's concepts that have been helpful or interesting to you, to go ahead and continue reading about them on your own. And then finally, again, we don't want to just have this information in our minds and then go back to our normal routines, but we really want to create some intentions for how am I going to live out the things that I learned today. So we really encourage you to take a second to look at this list and think about what is the one thing that I'm committing to doing that's going to be a little different from what I have been doing. And all of these might seem like good ideas. I'm going to encourage you not to say everything, but just to choose the one primary thing. Because sometimes when we set a goal, we bite off more than we can chew and we say, I'm going to do everything. And then we can't do everything. And then we get discouraged and say, oh, I guess I'll do nothing. And so try and just set something that's realistic and a place to start. And then if it grows from there, fantastic. But let's start with just one thing. So that might be reflecting on your motivation for choosing your work and then how that work is currently feeling. That could be paying attention to your internal dialogue and whether that dialogue is optimistic or pessimistic. What kind of thoughts are you telling yourself about your work life, and how does it affect your attitude and your mood? Reflect on your plan B. If you didn't do this work, what else would you do? And just spend some time thinking and dreaming, which might cause you to say, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. Or it might cause you to say, well, there's pieces that I've lost. And so how can I bring that into what I'm currently involved in? Practicing self-compassion, practicing compassion for others, taking breaks during the workday, scheduling some vacation time, finding ways to release energy regularly. And so whatever physical practices help you to do that, practicing gratitude regularly, or creating rituals for how you start and end your workday. So this would be another time where we would give people time to reflect and choose their one thing, and then send people into breakout rooms again to discuss. And the reason we would do that is, first of all, to make people really commit to what is their one thing that they're going to share, but also it also provides a sense of accountability. So now I've not only said this to myself in my mind, but I said it to this other person, and they might ask me, how did that go? And so it just makes it a little more likely that we are going to follow through, even though we might be busy, we might get distracted. It just gives us that accountability to help us. So again, I'm going to encourage you, if you're watching with other people, to pause the video right now and take another 7 minutes or so to just talk with each other. What is my intention that I chose? If you're watching this video by yourself, take a pause and think about, who am I going to share my intention with? So that leaves you with 2 things to share with somebody after you've watched this video. How has trauma been affecting me? And what's my intention of what I'm going to do differently because I watched this video? So thank you so much for watching and spending this time with us. We are really glad that people are engaging in this content, and we hope that it was helpful. So please reach out to us with questions or comments. And whether we get to meet you in person or you just watch this video, we're here to support you. So just know that Student Health and Counseling Services is here for students and also as a consultation and a support for staff and faculty. So please reach out to us if there's anything we can do for you. Thank you so much.